Many people have asked me to show how we bake the bread that we sell in store. So let me first tell you about spelt. Spelt is like an ancient kernel, something that has never been modified or changed by human hands. It's still as it's made by God. So what we do is we import the spelt from Germany, and they come in 25 kilo bags. We get that, and we get white flour. We don't import milled flour. So what we use the kernels, and then we mill the flour, and that gives us the ground wholemeal flour. You'll see in a minute when we go to bake. So that's imported as whole kernels. Then we have white flour. This is also made from spelt. This we also import in 25 kilo bags. That you can use for any baking, like pastry baking that you want to do. It's just an amazing flour. We bake cake with it. We use nothing else in our house other than spelt. Spelt also has a few other things that you can use. We also import this, which is, you can see, wholemeal spelt, and dinkel is the German word for spelt, and this is wholemeal spaghetti. You get it in various shapes, of course. This is spiralen or screw spaghetti pasta. Those are all kinds of things that you can do with spelt. Basically, what you can do with wheat flour, you can do with spelt flour. It's an amazing thing, and the amazing thing about spelt is that it is well tolerated by all 4 blood groups. Therefore, if you bake a spelt bread or you make a pancake with spelt, it should suit everybody in the house. It still contains gluten, but it is of course wheat-free. There's sometimes a confusion there. Spelt has gluten, wheat has gluten, oats has some kind of gluten, rye has gluten. Those are different kinds of grains, but they all contain gluten. So when somebody tells you go wheat-free, gluten-free, often they don't really mean or know what they're talking about. What you really need to do is you need to have a wheat-free diet, because wheat, unfortunately, has been changed in so many ways that it can grow in different climates. This spelt is imported from Germany, and it's extremely cold in the area in northern Germany where it grows. So it needs a very, very cold climate to grow, which we really don't have in South Africa. Therefore, it's imported. So in order to have, in the past, to make it grow in South Africa and in other parts of the world, the wheat was bastardized, hybridized, modified, all kinds of things done to it, but our tummies have never changed. So it really isn't the gluten, it is the wheat that is the issue. So if you go gluten-free, then you have no gluten in any of the products that you bake, and they don't rise properly, and it's very, very difficult to bake with them. The difference is that spelt, being never modified, is still absolutely compatible with our body. So for all 4 blood types, it works well. And yeah, of course, if you have something like celiac disease where you have a true gluten allergy, then that is not something that you should be having. But that is not the case in my experience over 20 years with most people. It is the wheat that has been modified that's the issue. So now we're going to go home, and I'm going to show you how to bake the bread. Linnie is going to go through the whole process, so sit back and enjoy the process and how to bake, and in the end you'll have an amazing bread. Right, so here we are with baking bread today. We're going to start by milling the flour, and Linnie starts by milling the kernels. We get the fresh spelt kernels, and this is what they look like. They look just like wheat kernels, but as I've explained, they aren't wheat. So show us how we mill. It's going to be a bit noisy, but you'll get the idea.
temperature of your different products is very important. In summer and winter it will obviously differ. Never store your flour in the freezer and then use it immediately. If you are grinding your own kernels, the temperature will automatically be at a perfect temperature. It will be between 26 and about 30 degrees Celsius, but as you use it, the temperature will fall. In summer, be careful that your dough's temperature do not rise above 27 degrees Celsius. In winter, make sure the temperature is not less than 23 degrees Celsius. It will definitely have an effect on the rising of the dough. You will use your flour at about 26 to 28, 29 degrees Celsius. In winter, the water from the tap will be much colder than in summer. So please make sure you have about lukewarm temperature. The water temperature I'm using is at about 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. And as you use it and work with it, it will fall, so it will have an end product of about 23 to 25 degrees Celsius. Also very important, when you use your yeast and mix it with water, you cannot use cold water. You do need lukewarm water, but that must not be above 28 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, your culture inside the yeast will die at above 28 to 30 degrees Celsius.
Where do you store the yeast?
The yeast you store in your fridge, and you use it directly out of your fridge. We also use the pink or Himalayan salt, and it can be at a normal room temperature. Depending on the quality of your spelt kernel or your spelt flour, I use white or refined spelt in the mixture. So I use about 200 grams of refined spelt flour, and then I fill it up to 1,530 grams in total.
Of course, it's important to zero your scale.
And it's really important to make sure you use the exact amount.
Okay, so that's a mixture of white and whole
stone ground spelt flour. I just slightly mix it. Then it's time to weigh the yeast. You need 24 grams of yeast.
Where do you get the dry yeast, the wet yeast?
I get it from the local store at the bakery department.
You can pay.
$24 grams of yeast. This Himalayan salt, you need 29 grams of Himalayan salt. Next, you need to measure 200 milliliters of lukewarm water. You mix that into your yeast and let that sit. And another 200 grams of water, lukewarm. To mix with the salt.
Why don't you mix the two together?
Never mix your salt and your yeast before it's in contact with your flour. The salt will immediately kill the yeast and it will not do its work. So you always mix first your yeast into your flour, and then when that's well mixed, you can pour in the salt mixture. Dissolve the salt into the water. Since you don't want the salt to be mixed with your yeast, make sure you wash your tools properly before you mix your yeast. Allow your yeast to sit for about 2 to 3 minutes before you mix it. Next, you need to measure the amount of water that you're going to mix into your flour the first time. Zero your scale and measure 670 milliliters of water.
What is the temperature of that water?
This water is about 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. Obviously, in summer, you will not let it be so warm. You will rather let it be colder, about 20 to 22 degrees Celsius, because the heat in the room will let the dough's temperature rise. I like to use gloves when I work with the dough, since there's yeast that you're working with. If there's anything that's a scratch or anything on your hands, it can cause infection into the wound. Next, I pour out the flour on a clean surface. I use a scraper to make a hole in the middle, like a well, and then I will start pouring in the 670 milliliters of water, and I will gently start to mix the water with the dough. When you pour in too many water at once, it will make lumps, and you don't want that. So just use your fingers to mix in the flour and the water. You can widen the well as you work to make it easier. And if you need to repair your sides, you can use your scraper. You do not mix in all the flour into the water. Next, you mixed in your yeast. The temperature that I feel is like lukewarm, and that's what you want. When you're sure the yeast is well mixed into the water and flour, you can add the salt. Now you can start bringing in all the flour from the sides. And your scraper will now come in handy. Bring everything together. As you can see, the temperature will now start to fall. That's why you start with a little higher temperature than you want for the end product. The scraper also helps you to work on a clean surface and it's not flour everywhere. As soon as the flour is worked in, you can start to use both hands and now gently start to push the flour with the palm of your hand and just bring it all together in a smooth dough. You will immediately start to feel the elasticity in the dough. It will start to give away under your palm. I do this about 20 to 30 times and then I will bring it together in a fold action. I will fold the dough to the top, then I will turn it 90 degrees and I will fold it again about 4 to 5 times. And then it's like an envelope, fold from the bottom to the top, and then I will make a nice round ball of dough. Next, I will pour in some olive oil to just prevent the dough to stick to the sides. Do it up to the top because it's going to rise. And then you gently take your dough and you put it inside. Now it will rest in the winter at a good room temperature. It will rest for about 40 to 45 minutes. In summer it will be about 35 minutes because it's just too hot. And the dough from drying out while it is resting, just cover it with a piece of cloth. "45 minutes is now over and now I will do the first fold of the dough. It had rested now. And now I'm just going to start to gently work through the dough with the palms of my hands. This I do for about 10 to 20 times. You will hear the sound as the air that's been trapped inside the dough is being dispersed through the dough.
What's the temperature of the dough?
We will need to check that, but that need to be between 23 and 26 degrees Celsius. After I've worked it with the palm of my hands, I will fold the dough again to give it a nice shape. Again, I will fold it from the bottom to the top. I will gently squeeze it there. I will do this about 10 times and then form it in a nice shape. A little bit more olive oil in the container and then gently put it in there. We can check the temperature and it is about 26 degrees Celsius, 26.3. And now we will cover it again and let it rest for another 40 to 45 minutes. The temperature of this dough is currently about 25-26 degrees Celsius, and that's where we want it to be. Now we're gonna give it a few turns again. First, we just work the dough with the palm of our hands. We do it for about 20 times. You will hear the sound of the air trapped in the dough. The air was created by the yeast while it's using the sugars in the flour as food. After about 10 to 20 times of working the dough like this, you will start folding it. You fold the bottom part to the top, give it a gentle squeeze, turn it 90 degrees. Fold the bottom again over to the top like an envelope, give it a soft squeeze and turn. And this you do for about 10 times. You will see the dough is stretching, working the gluten. Spelt is low in gluten, but if you work it like this and you give it 2 to 3 rests like we currently do, the gluten is worked to the max. Now you can just form it nicely, and then you put it back in the container. A little bit more olive oil. And gently put it inside. We will now give it another rest for 40 to 45 minutes since it's winter. This is the last and final fold, and you can see how the dough have beautifully developed over the past 3 rests.
So it's more elastic.
It's much more elastic. It's airy.
Just all the stuff you can see.
Beautiful dough. Again, you do 10 to 20 fold presses with the palm of your hands. You can hear there's much more air distributing through the dough. And then the fold and tuck in, fold, tuck in and turn, fold, tuck in and turn. About 10. You will see the dough is stretching. And there's no lumps. And then you can give it the final shape. See, it's a beautiful dough. Again, some olive oil. And then it's the final rest before we will shape it in whatever we want to bake it. We are now going to form the dough into different breads. I apply some butter to the container so the dough and the bread or buns don't stick. Since it's very cold and winter, I melted the butter and apply it with a brush. This will be for the buns. And then I have a loaf pan that I've also have some butter in, and then I'm using a basket for some bread, and I just put in some flour, refined flour, so it doesn't stick when I throw it out into the oven. I'm now gonna shape the dough in different loaves and bread. For the loaf, I use 720 grams of dough.
See the nice bubbles inside. This makes for excellent rising.
So this is for the loaf. Then I like to make a loaf in a basket. It will form in, and then I will throw it out onto the pan in the oven. That will also be about 750 grams. Important to cut the dough with the scraper and do not pull the dough apart. Now I'm gonna form the dough to put into the loaf pan, and I just gently form the loaf. For the basket, you will need some extra flour. You do the same as you form it with the loaf, but then you will need to dust it with some extra flour to prevent it from sticking to the basket when you throw it out in the oven. That we will put aside to rise, and then I'm going to form some of the buns, about 100 gram buns. Important to cover the rising dough again so it doesn't dry out, and then it cannot rise when it gets into the oven. I will now form 100 gram buns.
So you cut it, why?
I cut it to prevent the squeezing out of the beautiful air that's been in the dough. It's important to work swiftly because the dough will keep rising. And a small one for the baby in the house. Now, to shape a bun, I will do exactly the same folding technique than I do while it's resting and folding. I will do that for about 2 or 3 times, and then just turn it to make a nice bun. Again, you'll fold and turn the 90 degrees until it is nicely shaped, and then put in.
Okay.
This will now also rest with the rest of the dough for about 30 minutes. About 15 minutes into the resting, I will put on my oven. The oven will be on the highest you can put it. Mine can go up to 230 degrees, but I turn it beyond that so I can really make sure it's a hot oven.
In the stove we have terracotta tiles that we've cut so that it retains the heat. It's best if you cut the tiles, not one big tile, so that because of the expansion and the contraction they don't crack too much. And that is the pan that goes inside the oven. We'll put the bread on it in a minute.
We will now make cuts on top of the buns and on the loaf. This one we will do after we have put it, throw it out in the oven. So normally I make a little bit of flour on top of the buns and the loaf.
How long did it rest?
These rest for about 40 minutes since it's cold. In summertime it will be less. It will be not more than 30 minutes. Okay. Now I will use a very sharp bread knife to give it a cut on top. That will give it the opportunity to let the air escape without a nasty crack. Also on the buns. This is normally the signature of the baker on the bread. So now different people make different kind of cuts. Okay, now we will go to the oven. This one we will throw out on the plates and then we will give it a cut. Here we will also give it a cut. The loaf and the buns. After I've put it in the oven, I will get the hot water and we will put that in the bottom of the oven to give it a steam, and that will give a brown and crust top on the bread. The bread will now be above 230 degrees Celsius for the first 8 minutes, and then we will turn it down to 230 degrees for 20 minutes, turn it, and another 20 minutes on 230. After another 10 minutes, we're taking out the buns. And it's now 20 minutes since we've turned down the oven, and we are turning the loaves. We have now taken out the buns out of the pan to prevent them from becoming soggy. The final 20 minutes is now over and we can take out the final product.
Lovely.